Well, as a pastor now for some few years, I've discovered something there that comes with the trade. Anytime we go anywhere, anytime I'm driving, especially if I'm driving someplace new to me, you're constantly on the lookout. And I notice churches and I notice church signs. If I have occasion to go into a church, pick up a bulletin. Pick up any other little thing laying around too, not off the offering plate, but seeing what people, how they worship and services and songs and how all that thing, how all that works. And it's to the point now, I don't even have to go anywhere. Stuff comes to me. People will go on vacation and sometimes they come back, see, I was in church. And I don't want to discourage you from that. Just I'm saying, sometimes people go and they want to make sure I knew they were in church. They bring me that bulletin or they bring me something they saw in another church and they liked, and could we use that here? People will forward jokes and forward things. I have a father-in-law who shall remain nameless, but I only have one, and oftentimes he likes to greet me with a joke about pastor. Did you hear about the pastor? It's kind of toned down. I think he's slowly running out of material after 22 years, but there was a long stretch there. Any new pastor joke came up, he wanted to share that with me. Anyway, years ago, I ran across an announcement in the bulletin with my heightened consciousness about these things. I ran across an announcement in a bulletin from another church. It was shown to me. And I think it was like right after the beginning of the new year. And there was an announcement here for a special women's weight loss program. It's the beginning of the year. Ladies, has the holidays been a little unkind to your figure, kind of thing, and we want to get together and non-judgmental, and we want to be very, accepting, and we're going to help you, and let's all work together to be the best that we can, this kind of thing. Right underneath that, there was an announcement for a men's weight loss group. Now, there was a little bit of a contrast, and I don't have the bulletin, I don't remember exactly, but it was pretty close to this. The name was something to the effect of, like, the Fat Boys Club. So that was, like, really different right off the bat from the ladies' announcement. But then, in contrast to the ladies' announcement, where it's all about how we're going to help each other and affirm each other and accept each other, and we all do the best that we can, the men's announcement ran something like this: we are a non-nurturing, non-supportive group that weighs too much and won't coddle you. Come on out and let's get our act into gear. That's about what it was. I mean, I distinctly remember we are a non-supportive, non-nurturing, caregiving group. Come on out. Boy. Now, one of the distinctives of our faith as followers of Jesus, one of the things that we think about ourselves, and one of the things that many people who don't even go to church or don't believe in that stuff think about us, is that we care. This is one of the truisms, one of the things that defines us, or we think defines us. We care. We're nice. We're nice. We love and we accept. And did I mention we care? When things are going bad, the church is supposed to be the place and the people where we care. We care about you. We're going to help you. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, of course, but one of the clearest reasons that we have this image that we care, and that others have this image of us that we care, even there are unbelievers who will recognize this, is because there is this image that we have of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. Jesus as a shepherd. This idea that we have of what caring is and what Christianity is about is most certainly shaped by that image. Today, that's what we're going to discuss. This is the fourth of the I am statements in the Gospel of John. So far, we've examined Jesus as the bread of life, Jesus as the light of the world, and Jesus as the gate. Today, we consider Jesus the Good Shepherd. And I'd like to read for you our passage this morning. You can open up your Bibles there and keep them open to this. This is John chapter 10, and I'm beginning at verse 11 to 14. And here we hear these words: I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the Good Shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. So here we have Jesus, and he is describing himself as the Good Shepherd. To the people of his day, shepherd was a very, very familiar image. In fact, people centuries before Jesus, centuries and centuries before Jesus, shepherd was a very familiar image. The first shepherd that we know of in the Bible was Abel. Of course, he did not have a very long career because of the unfortunate thing between him and his brother Cain, where Cain kills him out of jealousy when they go to offer sacrifice to the Lord to worship God. But many of the patriarchs of the Old Testament, many of those founding fathers of the faith of Israel were very closely tied to shepherding. Abraham was a shepherd, as was his son Isaac. They had huge flocks, and this was their primary means of living, of sustenance. They were shepherds. It was Abraham and Isaac, and then, of course, Jacob. Jacob was a shepherd, and we have stories how he went off to get married, and he took care of his uncle, soon-to-be father-in-law's flocks, and multiplied them, and then Jacob was an extraordinary shepherd there. And really, in the early years of Israel, we see that God's people were a nomadic people, very, very involved with herding sheep. It was herding sheep that they did when they were in Egypt. That Joseph in Egypt, bringing down his family, Jacob and the brothers, they came down to Egypt to escape the famine that was going on in the promised land. And what did they do? They herded sheep, and they were given care of all of Pharaoh's, all of Egypt's flocks. They were really, really big into sheep. Sheep futures were what they were all about. Later on, though, as they got settled in the promised land, they came back out of Egypt, and they got settled into their promised land that God had given to them. There were still a lot of shepherds around. You didn't have to look very far to find them. And probably the most famous person that we can think of, the most famous shepherd we can think of when they got settled in their promised land, was David. Here was a young boy, a shepherd that God chooses and raises up to be king. It's one of the original rags to riches stories that you can think of here. He is the one who is famous for writing the psalm that so many think of when you think about shepherd. He's the one famous for writing the psalm that Steph shared with us, Psalm 23. And if you think about that psalm, it's quite a comforting and idyllic picture that is painted for us here, talking about God's care for the sheep. Now, I've shared before how I have a little bit of experience in farming. My grandparents and then my mom, for years, whether it was in my grandparents' farm or whether it was back at home on our little farmette, there were a lot of opportunities that I had and my siblings and I had to take care of animals, to help and to care for animals. We especially liked helping with the young animals, with the babies. At my grandparents', that meant helping with the calves. And so we would go out at milking time, and my grandfather could manage to milk all the cows while we helped with the calves, 3 or 4 calves. At home at various times, we had baby chicks, we had piglets, we had baby sheep, we had baby goats, and I and my siblings, we loved to help with those animals. And you can guess what that kind of help entailed, right? There was a whole lot of cuddling and a whole lot of petting, and oh, they're so cute, let me have a turn. And so cuddling and helping with the sheep or piglets or chicks or whatever it is sometimes turned into a little bit of a fracas. But there we were helping with these animals, especially the young ones. Maybe once in a while we actually did give a bottle or did give a little bit of food to this particular animal that we were working with. It wasn't until we got older that we really got in there and helped in a big and a meaningful way. Before that, when I was little, especially, it was my mom that would end up taking primary care and was the primary caregiver for the baby animals or any others. She was the one that saw that they had straw and that their bedding was clean and that they were warm. She was the one that made sure and saw that they had fresh water and that there was food there for them. Or she was the one that saw that they had their bottle on schedule. Did we like helping out with a bottle? Sure, we liked helping out with a bottle. You mean it's time to do that again? We got bored pretty quick. That 4 o'clock bottle after school was fine. But then again, after supper, when it was cold or early in the morning before school, that That wasn't our thing. We were intermittent caregivers at best, my siblings and I. Our actions, they weren't the actions of a real shepherd or a real true caregiver. We were sometimes interested observers that weren't very observant. We could very easily miss the most obvious things when we were preoccupied with anything else. What you need to really appreciate, in David's writing in the 23rd Psalm, is how unidyllic it is. Being a caregiver like a shepherd is, it's intense. It's a lot of work. It's not a part-time thing. It's not a now and then kind of thing. Being a shepherd's hard work. It's dirty. It's thankless. It's often lonely, and it's sometimes dangerous. David describes in a couple of places how he fought off wild animals. Now, the life of the sheep might be somewhat idyllic if you think about that 23rd Psalm. Think about them. Think about the 23rd Psalm from the perspective of a sheep. Nice views. You got no real work to speak of, right? The meals are completely arranged for, and you got someone to watch over for you. It's like the fully comprehensive package if you're going to Disney or a cruise or something. Everything is provided, no worries, no muss, no fuss. But the life of a shepherd was far from it. Care was a very intensive thing. And it's not hard to see then a lot of connection between Jesus and the description that we have in Psalm 23. It's not hard to see how Jesus is a very complete caregiver. Any of you who have followed Jesus and have given your life to him and have walked with Jesus through difficult times especially, know that Jesus is a very complete caregiver and he cares for all of our needs. It doesn't mean that we don't go through hardships or trials or dark valleys, but Jesus is there caring and providing for us. However, our text today in John, where Jesus describes himself not just as the shepherd, but the good shepherd, takes things in a little bit of a different direction than Psalm 23 when it talks about the care that Jesus provides, when it talks about the experience of a shepherd. But first, let me note here that Jesus is the good shepherd, not just the shepherd. When we read John 10:11-14, Jesus describes himself as the good shepherd, not just the shepherd. Okay? I want you to think about that. If you think about pretty much any kind of job that you could think of, there are people who are good at it or suited for it, and others who maybe are not quite as suited for it. There's good accountants, and there's ones that you wouldn't trust with, like $10 from the PTA, right, Dave? Maybe all of you can probably think of a good teacher that you had. Even if you don't like school, you can probably all think of a teacher that you liked, right? There was a teacher that you connected with, or they connected with you, and then you can probably think of a few teachers like, oh my goodness, they should have retired 30 years ago, or they should have done something else, anything else. They should not have been a teacher. Those teachers that are good, or that accountant is good, whatever it might be, there's something that sets them apart compared to the ones that are not so good. Something makes them stand out. Well, something makes Jesus stand out too as the good shepherd and not just simply shepherd compared to others. What is it? What is it that makes Jesus stand out? If we look at the text, could it be what we see at the end of verse 14? He says, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Well, that actually is kind of common for a shepherd. You and I might look at a flock of sheep, whether that's 20 or 50 or 1,000. We might look at a flock of sheep and think, yep, one white fluff ball, two fluff ball, three fluff ball, and can't tell a bit of difference. Let me ask you this. How many of you have driven down E-Town Road this way and seen the little flock of sheep there on the left there, down just a little bit? And can you pick them apart? Do you know which one is Fred and which one is Millie? I don't know if that's their names, but all right. Let's say you drove down there, you saw the flock, and then you came back the other direction 5 minutes later. Could you tell that this one had moved from here to there, or that this one here was flopped over on its back now? Could you tell them apart? Probably not. Probably not. but a shepherd knows each one of their sheep very, very personally, very, very individually. This is really brought home to me as I think about my grandfather and his work on the farm. My grandfather, I watched him for years. He had just 40 or 45 cows. It wasn't a whole lot, but there's always a few that were coming. There's always a few that were going. And he knew them. I looked at them and all I saw was a big mass of big, giant, black and white cows. And all I knew was watch out for the tail and watch out for the legs. That's what you wanted to watch out for. If you were working in the barn between them, just make sure they don't try to do the bump. I couldn't tell this one from that one, but he knew each one. If we stood with him at the entrance of the barn or on the front lawn when he called the cows to come up at night to be milked, he'd call them up and then he could say, okay, there's Annie and there's Susie and there's Mary. I mean, he rattled them all off. He knew each one of them no matter how they came in. It was a mystery. It was a mystery to me. The shepherd knows his sheep. Now that isn't what sets Jesus apart, okay, as the good shepherd, because shepherds know their sheep. The shepherds know their sheep is what sets them apart from the hired man that works with the shepherd. So that's not it. What makes Jesus the good shepherd and stand out, he actually mentions it in the first verse we read in verse 11, and it comes up again as we continue to read on a few more verses in John chapter 10. I'd like to reread this portion of Scripture and go a little bit further. So I'm going to start back at verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep, so when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen, but I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. Clearly you see that Jesus, as a shepherd, does much more than simply care for the sheep, even the comprehensive caring for the sheep. The thing that makes Jesus the good shepherd, it's above and beyond other shepherds. It's above and beyond the duties of a shepherd. He doesn't just put himself at risk to protect his sheep if needed. Jesus, the good shepherd, lays down his life for the sheep. Verse 11 mentions it in a general way that the good shepherd lays down his life. Verse 15 then is very specific. Jesus says it of himself that he lays down his life. And then verse 17 and 18 repeated here a little different way. This idea that Jesus lays down his life for his sheep. This is the arrangement. This is the arrangement between Jesus and God the Father. In other words, Jesus took the job. Jesus took the job and became the shepherd. He became the good shepherd, expecting to do just that, to lay down his life. He knew that going in. Not that he might, but that he would lay down his life. If you think about work today, how many of you are still in the workforce today? Some of you are blissfully retired. Some of us are still working. Think about that job that you have, or think about maybe taking a new job. There are quite a few jobs today where you have to understand there's some risk that comes with it. If you're going to sign up for this job, there's some risk that comes with it. And some of them, in fact, you could die carrying out your job that you're doing to put groceries on the table. Jobs in the military and police come to mind very easily when we think about jobs that could have considerable risk. Every time a police officer pulls over someone, they don't know what to expect. Anytime they walk into a house or some place where there's a disturbance, they don't know what to expect. Military folks, when they go and they're serving, they go expecting there is a possibility that this could be it, but I am going. But those aren't the only kind of jobs that come with risk that you have to be aware of. There are many jobs that have some danger attached to them, and really, you need to be aware. Firefighters. How many times have we seen a tragic story where a fireman lost his life trying to care for that fire, take care of it, and save people? It used to be a horrendous thing. It's better now, but not perfect. But for years and years and years and years, if you were a miner, if you went underground, there was a real reasonable expectation you wouldn't come back at the end of the shift. That was a very real thing. There are certainly construction jobs, a lot of construction jobs, which can carry some significant risk with them. If you look at the stories of the building of America, and you look at the stories of laying down these grand railroads and bridges and dams, the number of lives that were lost in those construction projects is enormous. But it still happens today. It still happens today. In quarries or ditches where plumbers are working, or some electrical accident, there are things that happen and people lose their lives carrying out their job. You can even, many folk who work in medicine can be at risk. Now, you're probably not too at risk if you're taking temperatures or receptions for the kiddos in the pediatric office, but how about a medical missionary? How about people that go to third world countries to minister to the needs, to the physical, medical needs of folks? There are a lot of jobs where if you're going to sign up for this, you have to know there's a risk. But I'm not aware of any job where the expected outcome is death. That was the case for Jesus. To be called the bread of life, he was prepared and he expected to be broken. To be called the light of the world, he knew that light would go out. To be the gate, he knew that many would ignore, go around, or try to tear down, to break him, to ignore. To be the good shepherd, he knew where it would lead. He knew that he would, not that he might, but that he would give his life. And indeed he did. His care for his flock, his people, you and me, was so complete, he gave all that we might have all. And we, his sheep, must never forget that what made Jesus who we know him to be was sacrifice. But too, as followers, as junior partners charged with leading others to God the Father through Jesus, we must ask ourselves, are we willing to sacrifice? Or are there limits to how we will follow, or how we will love? Well, this might feel like we're grinding gears here for a second, but maybe when we think of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, we should think a little less of green pastures and bubbling brooks, and think instead, be reminded instead of the cross. After all, that is how Jesus laid down his life. He lay down on the cross and was nailed to it, then lifted up for the world to see what perfect love looks like. Maybe we should remember that Jesus said in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me.